Hey guys, welcome to my channel BitGlenn. My name's Glenn and I like to share with you what I learn in the world of cryptocurrency as I go through it. So today I wanted to talk about the HEX share price and what does that mean for you and me going forward in the HEX platform. So let's jump right into it. So hey guys, welcome to my video. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been liking my videos lately. My likes have really increased rapidly over the last couple of weeks. So really big thank you to everyone out there. But it doesn't mean I want you to slow down. I still want you to keep smashing those likes. Also, click the subscribe button if you're new to this channel and click the bell notification if you want to be notified when I next do a live stream or when I upload a video like this. Also, if you want to reach out to me on a more personal level, you can contact me via Telegram. There's a Team BitGlenn group chat which is in the description down below if you just want to follow that link, or you can download it on iOS and just search for Team BitGlenn, or you can contact me via Twitter, which is just the handle name BitGlenn. Tag me in some funny memes. I like funny stuff on Twitter. That's it, me shilling my social media. Let's get into today's topic of the video, and that's going to be regarding the share price in HEX. I actually tried recording this video twice last night, so I've already spent about 4 hours trying to record this video, but it's quite a complicated way, especially if you don't understand it fully. It's quite hard to put into words and maths like what it is and how you're going to best utilize that. So I'm not going to do it full justice, but I just want to bring up to you guys a couple of YouTubers that have helped me along the way. So one of them being a YouTuber called Hexologist, who actually done a 24-hour live stream. Now within that he had a few guests from different YouTubers that are in the HEX ecosystem, and they brought up about the share price and how actually that is going to be a powerful tool going forward. He then had Richard Hart on, and Richard Hart said, yeah, we put in this mechanism to stop people from trying to gain an advantage using compounding interest, which I'll get into in a second. But actually that mechanism that we've put in is going to be a huge tool going forward, and I didn't realize how valuable it was going to be. Something along those lines he was saying. So I sort of looked deeper into that and I went down sort of a rabbit hole of share price of HEX, and I'm not referring to the USD price per HEX that relates to how much HEX you accumulate when you stake. So two separate things there. I then went and contacted the guys in the Telegram group chat of HEX. There's a couple of platforms on there. Crypto Coffee, after we did our live stream, he invited me into a live chat and I asked a couple of questions, obviously being a complete HEX noob. And there were a couple of people there that were really helpful. Now someone called Carl, who's in the development team of HEX, he actually created a model of how the share price of HEX, used in a way where you can multiply it over say 10 years, could give you 80x return on your investment in HEX. So I'm not talking about 80x in the USD price or anything like that. This is just the amount of HEX you have, what you would end up with, 80x. I then went over to a channel called Good Texture GT. He's done a collection of videos trying to explain the share price and what it will mean for people going forward. So I actually watched all of them. So again, that's why it took me quite long last night, because I had to watch his data and then process it and then think how I would word that in my own way. Basically information that I've gained through these two YouTubers, so I want to say a big thank you to them. Check out their channels. I know it's not very popular for YouTubers to recommend other YouTubers for some reason, I don't know why, but why can't we all be friends? So let's get over to my explanation of what the HEX share price is. So to get into the HEX share price, I just want to really run over very quickly the way that HEX works from my understanding at the moment. So we all know, as of watching this video, where we've come from and where we're heading to and how we've actually best utilized the strategy going forward. So HEX, as we all know, has this AA lobby. You send it Ethereum every day. There's 500 million HEX being generated every day, and depending on how many people put in Ethereum, that will spit you out a certain amount of HEX. The last few days have been in the 30,000 region. Some have been 50, 40s, 20s. But you get a certain amount of HEX. So we all understand that. And depending on the price of HEX, so if the price of HEX rapidly increases, which it is doing the last couple of days, then you may get a better deal through the AA platform. If the price goes down, you tend to get a better deal using Uniswap. So if I send 1 Ethereum to Uniswap, currently I'm getting 43,000. As of today on the AA platform, I'm getting 43,000. If you use my referral link in the description down below, you get an additional 10% of Hex when you follow that link. Now that isn't just if you're new to Hex, this is every time. So if you've bought Hex already, you can still click on my link and you will get then a 10% of whatever Hex you buy on that day. So you can use that link as many times as you like. Disclaimer, I get a kickback from that as well, so that goes into my Hex pot as well. So being as honest and transparent as I can be. But I will say, if you get a better deal at the end of the day by using Uniswap, which obviously I don't get any kickback from, I would rather you use this, because I want you, as one of my viewers and subscribers, I want you to accumulate as much money in Hex as possible rather than giving me a small tip. I would rather that. So that's how the Hex AA platform works. Now that is to accumulate Hex, and there's a lot of people discussing whether it's better to use Uniswap or whether it's better to actually use this AA platform. I'll leave that up to you. You can check on the day at the time. Plus you got to add in the 10% referral link, like including on your stake. So like now you would actually get about 48,000 Hex versus obviously 43, but then that may go up. So I'll leave that for you guys to make your own decision on any given day. We're talking about the share price. Now when you actually go over to the Hex homepage, it has the today's lobby and ones that you've previously taken part in, and the current day is 178. This is how many hours we've got left of today. Total supply of Hex is 186 billion, and then this is my stats. So how much I have staked, 302,000. The interest due to me is 171,741 Hex, and how much Hex I haven't got staked, which is 0. I've got 100% staked. Look at me, bullish. And when you go down, you've got here the total day payout. So this is all the different amount of Hex. But then here we have the total shares that are available. So these are increasing as time is going on. So you can check out all the total shares every single day since Hex started. Again, I've said before in the past, Hex is very transparent, very clear. I just wish maybe there was a bit more educational tools on there really for new people getting in. And some people have contacted me and said, Glenn, Hex is really hard to understand, which I know people in the Hex community will hear that and be like, so silly, like it's so easy. But for someone new into cryptocurrency is quite complicated as it is to start off with. Then you get involved in Hex and then it's like so that's how Hex works. Once you've got your Hex, what can you do with it? You can send it to people, you can stake it. That's probably one of the two most popular options you can do. So if I want to stake, we have here stake bonuses. Now you may think that, like I did until 2 days ago, that really the only reason to actually hold for a period of time was for the big payday, which happens after day 354 or something like that, so essentially just under a year. There will be a big payday. Anyone who is staking between now and after that date will receive a proportion of the big payday. Now, I didn't think it mattered. I actually thought it was depending on how much you had staked, but I'm going to show you something quickly. So if you was to stake 100,000 Hex, you can see on the stake bonuses on the right hand side, I've tried to make this as large as possible so you can see what I'm seeing. You have the longer pays better bonus, which currently we don't qualify for, so we get 0 because I haven't put in any days of time. And then you have the bigger pay days, which is only 6 Hex. That's quite low. So obviously 100,000 Hex, it doesn't seem to be worthy enough of being a big stake. But let's forget that for a moment. Now we're going to put in the length of days. So let's say I put in 7 days. You can see here that I'm going to receive 329 Hex for staking longer, if you like. And if I was to increase that to 90 days, you can see that the amount of Hex that I get goes up massively. So I've got 4,890 Hex in the longer pays better multiplier. But the bigger pays better is still at 6. So very low percentage. This gives me my effective Hex that I'm going to end up with. But this is what I want to concentrate on today, the stake shares and the share rates. So you can see here at the moment, with that amount of staked for that amount of time, I would have shares of 10.140. So when you're staking your shares, what you're actually doing is you're burning your hex. So that hex becomes null and void. It disappears. But the maths has gone into a smart contract based on the Ethereum ERC20 smart contract platform that you put in this amount for this amount of days. So you should incur this much interest back to you, including a proportion of emergency staked fees, inflation rate. So there's a lot of maths going on there. But let's just think about the stake shares. How do they determine why I should get 100 for 100,000 hex? Why do I get 10.14 trillion shares? Well, that's to do with the length of time and the amount of money that you're staking to make it always beneficial for you to stake longer versus someone who does compounding interest over shorter periods of time. So what I mean by that, if I had 100 hex, just for simple maths, and this isn't real world case returns, if I had 100 hex and I staked it for 1 week, let's just say at the end of that week I had 110 hex. Now you would imagine if I stake that for another week I'd have 120. But no, the way compounding interest works is you're not staking in the second week 100 hex, you're staking 110. So therefore you would then receive on the third week 122 hex. So then the next week you would receive 137, and then the week after that you'd receive 148. So you can see that it would multiply very quickly. Now on platforms like this, people would take advantage and they will try and do that on a regular basis so that they almost have like a hockey stick return on investment. And what do I mean by hockey stick? If you think of a hockey stick actually sideways, it's very long and straight and then all of a sudden has a big kick up. And that's the way compounding interest works. And that works if you compound interest in the stocks and shares market, if you have interest in your bank account. Each and every year you're earning interest on what you earned the year before plus the interest, so then it's compounding on top of itself. This is what Hex tried to combat by putting in a mechanism of the share price, so that someone who stakes a long time will always be better off than the guy that does loads of little stakes. But I think based on what I saw in the video with the chat with Richard, they'd done this mechanism, but they didn't quite realise sort of the nuances of the share price and what it actually means and how people can really take advantage of it at this early stage. So we have our 100,000 hex staked for 90 days. Now let's change that to 1 year, so 365 days. You can see here that the longer pays better goes up massively to 20,000 hex. And if I was to do that over 10 years, I get 200,000 hex. Now that's the multiplier for the longer pays better. My bigger pays better is still at 6, so that stays the same. So that gives me a total amount of hex that I should receive there. Plus, if we look at the stake shares, so how much shares I have in hex, it's actually 29 trillion. I'm going to get into more in depth on what that means in a second. But you can see here my bigger payday has also increased to 547,000. Whereas if I was to do this over, say, 180 days, my bigger payday is 200,000. So the longer you stake for, not only the better the bonuses that you get for the longer pays better, you also get a bigger payday, which means your gain in percentages goes up massively. And then your APY is massive. But more interestingly than that, so that's already incentive enough. That's enough incentive. That's the best interest rates you're going to get anywhere sort of at the moment. But when we look at the stake share price, this 10.618 trillion, you will maintain that for the full length of the stake. So if I was to just stake for 7 days, I will get a stake share of 9.6 trillion, and that will last for 7 days. But the share price per hex is always getting more expensive, which means that if I did 100,000 stake in, say, 2 weeks time for 7 days, I won't get the same amount of shares again. I will get a lower amount. Now, if you imagine people thinking over a short period of time, oh, okay, so I'm better off doing a 3-week stake rather than a 1 week stake. Yes, that's right. That plays into the pumpamental that Hex was built on. But imagine if you're someone who has staked for 10 years, so 3,650 days or 15 years. You are now receiving, for the same amount of tokens, 29 trillion shares. Now that doesn't just play into the big payday. This pays into the inflation of Hex, which is set as a minimum of 3.69. So you're always going to get a proportion of that inflation. But it also, all the people emergency end staking, their fees for emergency end staking, they go to the shareholders. And what proportion of that share do you get? Well, that all depends on this 29 trillion. The higher stake share you have, the more of those fees you get every single day of that period. After that 10-year date, that stake ends and they will get nowhere near. The share price will be so high that they're going to be lucky to get, I don't know, 1 trillion worth of shares. So then the profitability of another 10-year stake after this 10-year stake is going to be a lot less than this one right now. So let's look at this in some visualization. So if I go over to hexinfo.io, there's a lot of information on this page, so I'm not going to try and go into it too much right now, but let's have a little look at this pie chart that we have here. So this is the amount of Hex that are staked versus unstaked. So there are currently 186 billion Hex that are not staked. That's 77% of all Hex. People are just holding them and hope the price goes up. They might be buying and selling through Uniswap and exchanging it for Ethereum or whatever. But there's 22% of people that are staking. And I'm one of those 22%. But all the profits from Hex, like I said, with the inflation rate, so the coins that are generated each year, and also the emergency stakers, they all go to this people that are staking, but that's only 22%. So out of that 22%, 100% of the profits are in there, if you like, and then that is divided between those 22% of people. But how do you work out what your share is? How do you know what your share is out of those 22% of people? So if we go down, we also have another graph. We also have here the share price. So like I was referring to, when you stake, you have that 29 trillion shares. Well, if I was to stake only over, I don't know, 90 days, we got something like 9 trillion or 6 trillion. Can't remember what the figure was. Well, after that date, the share price goes up. So this is not US dollar. I'm just reiterating that. This is not US dollar per Hex price valuations. If you're here for that, you may want to click off this video. This is the share price for when you stake your Hex tokens for a period of time. So let's have a look at what has actually happened. This is real world live data. This is live as of right now. This goes all the way to today, the 28th of May at 147. So that's right now. So we can see here that the share price started at 1.00011. And it has slowly increased. So someone who was staking here is getting less shares than someone who started staking here. So this always plays into the longer pays better philosophy. Now if we look at the predicted share price, so this is, the pink is what has actually happened and the yellow is what is predicted to happen, and this line has always stayed the same. So you can see that the pink has sometimes gone under it, sometimes gone over it, but it is roughly stayed in line with the predicted one due to the algorithm that's put in place day one of Hex. So you can see up to the big payday, it continuously rises up to 1.11293. So you're actually worse off to stake here than you were here. Now, does that mean everyone's going to dump on that day? Probably not, because at that time they'll still be happy with that return. They may be getting 15 to 20% APR depending on how many people emergency stake and how long people stake for and how much Hex is worth on that day. So people will still stake. But we have a really awesome opportunity to get in on this graph at a very early stage. And depending on how long you stake for, you will gain the benefits of staking on that day for the whole length of your stake. So if I was to stake hearsay at a price of 1.01. Well, if I staked for 60 days and then after that 60 days I was like, oh, do you know what, I want to stake again. Well, let's go forward 60 days, that's 2 months. That will take me to April the 26th. I would then be paying a share price of 1.025. So that is a big gain. Obviously, when you're talking hundreds and millions of hex that you're going to be buying, that's a lot of percentages that add up. Obviously, this is where we're at today. So this is the share price right now on this pink graph, 103. So I'm better off to stake than someone who's going to stake here by about tenfold. Now, this is going to continuously rise to always combat the longer pays better philosophy. So now we've got our head around that. The earlier you stake with hex, it's always better to have staked yesterday. You always got a better deal yesterday with the share price of hex, not the USD price, the share price. The share price is always going up, and that's built into the algorithm and the cryptography of hex from the beginning. So that can't be altered or changed now. The only thing that affects it is how many people stake for, emergency stake. Obviously the big payday will change a lot of these figures when people sort of unstake and stake again. When we get all-time highs, people may emergency end stake to take advantage of selling on the market. So this will change very slightly, but if this model continues to follow this trend line like it has been for the first 6 months, then we know that you're always better to get in today than you are tomorrow. So let me just read this little statement here. Historic, current and predicted share price until big payday. Share price since the beginning until today. Predicted share price from today until the big payday. The share price heavily depends on the future user behavior, which cannot be predicted. So the developers of Hex can't predict that BitGlen's going to come along and buy 10 million Hex tokens, and then I'm going to stake them for 12.5 years, but then for some reason something happens in my life 3 years down the line and I need to emergency end stake, and I lose some of my capital and I lose all the interest that I would have incurred anyway. So that's going to skew the figures a little bit, and they can't predict what everyone's going to do. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people all participating in this, all coming and going, changing their mind, staking longer, staking shorter. They can't predict that, but they can take the data on board that has happened and use averages to work out, okay, this is what we have and this is what we predict to happen. So now we're going to go over to hex.live. I've shown you guys this website before, and you can see here this is my profile, and when I click more, sort of in a nice colorful visual way, shows you all your stats, which I think is really cool. So you can see here I have 302,000 hex staked. That's worth about $1,400 at the moment. I've earned 277 hex, which is only about $1 worth. So that's what I've earned when I've done a stake and it just ended, and then I obviously minted new coins. And at the moment, with my stakes that are running, I've occurred so far 1.7 thousand hex, which is $8.27. But I've also lost $9 through emergency end staking. One of those, which I did to show you guys on a video, I end stake a 100-day stake rather than the 10-day one. I didn't even realize until someone commented in my video. So it says here that I have 100% of my hex tokens staked, which I have. I've been staking all my coins. It says, wow, this account has staked 100% of its hex. The owner seems to understand the bigger pays better. The bigger pays better is not so much important to me anymore. It's more the length. I have 302,000 hex locked, and that's over 7 stakes. Now, I've touched on this before. I've said, oh, look, I'm an oily octopus and I've got 3.23 trillion shares, which is a total percentage of 0.0003321. I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't know what it referred to. I just looked at it and said, oh, look, I'm an oily octopus. Oh, cool. And that's it. That's as far as I've gone until yesterday. When we click on more about the leagues, it says Hex leagues are rankings of all accounts based on their relative percentage of hex shares, not the amount of hex they have, the hex shares. The more and longer an account stakes for, the more shares they are likely to get compared to other accounts. The relative percentage of shares changes dramatically based on staking positions of all accounts, so stake wisely. You can see here I'm an oily octopus, so I have 0.0001% of total shares. So in the total shares of staked coin, so out of that 22% of the pie chart, the pink bit we just saw, I will get 0.0001 of hex tokens within that time frame. So it's in my best interest to keep my position, or really go up a position, because then I will incur more hex tokens for every day that I'm staked for. The second that stake ends and I have to start a new one, my shares will decrease, because I'll have to take whatever the share price is that day, wherever it may be on this graph. So currently all my shares end this day here. So the day after that, I may get a worse share price than here, which means I'm starting all over again here. I'm better to stake for a 10-year time frame, which I know is mental to think about, because I will get this share price, this 103, for 10 years. Now this compounds massively, because obviously over 10 years the inflation goes up of the coin, the people staking, the penalties will increase, decrease, and you're going to get a larger share of that. So someone called Carl in the development group chat of Hex in Telegram, he's actually run a model, and he predicts that based on estimates of averages, so this is a lot of variables, and he openly states that it's not an exact science, but if you was to stake now for 10 years, the amount of shares that you would receive could mean potentially that you receive 80x the amount of Hex. 80 times the amount of Hex. So if you put in 100,000, you got to do 80 times that. I don't know what that is, but it's a lot. It's a lot of Hex over 10 years. Now, if the price of Hex over 10 years, it just stays the same. You've just gained 80 times what you're worth now. So it makes me understand now why people are staking on average for 4.5 years. Some people are staking for 2 days, some people are staking for 10 years, 15 years. And I understand now why. The science and the maths behind it, I get it. I understand why they're doing it. So how can we use this knowledge to better position ourselves going forward? So this all goes down to your appetite for risk. Do you believe in Hex? Do you think it's a good platform? Can you see it increasing? Do you think that Hex is going to be around for 8 to 10 years time? And how long do you want your money tied up for? You may be someone watching this, and I'm sure there's loads of you out there, because I've been in the same boat for many years. You might be like, look, all I've got is £500 or £300 or £1,000 or dollars or whatever. And you may think, I've missed the boat. I'm not going to get, the returns that all these YouTubers are talking about, and my friend who got in on Hex, I'm not going to get what he got because I've only got £1,000. Well, if you was to put in, say, 100,000 Hex, like I say, the way that you can actually better your position is to stake for longer. You will get a far better return than someone who's just staking for 39 days versus someone who's staking for 365. So you can really increase your position in Hex and become more of a wow, if you like, because you're going to be, one, getting the multipliers at the beginning added into what you should effectively end up with, plus you're getting more shares. For the course of that year, for 365 days, you're going to have a share ratio of 11.6 trillion shares versus someone who is going to get, let's say, a 1 month stake. They're going to get 9 trillion shares. So you're getting a lot more shares than he's getting, and he's going to then have to buy, after that 30 days, another stake for 30 days, and he won't even end up with 9 trillion. He'll get 7 trillion. But you will be sitting there for those 2 months still with the, 21 million? 11 million, sorry. So you're going to be in a better position than those people that are doing loads of stakes, and your wealth will grow in terms of Hex. I can't promise you obviously anything in the USD valuation. So if you believe in Hex, and if you like the project and you really want to sort of make an impact, buy some Hex today, not tomorrow. And this isn't financial advice. Buy it today and stake for a longer time frame. That's my advice to you, because you will end up with, out of everyone staked who is receiving profits in this small section of the pie, 100% of the profits are shared here. You want the largest piece of this pie. You imagine that being a whole circle. You want a sliver of that. So the longer you stake for, the bigger sliver of that pie you've got. And that is how you're going to maximize your returns with Hex. I just thought I'd bring that up today because I've never touched on it before. I've never quite understood it, but I really think that actually this is really important. And for full disclosure, I think I'm actually going to probably buy a few £100 worth of Hex over the next day or two once I've transferred some money over. And I'm actually going to stake quite a long stake compared to my other ones. All my other ones end literally just after the big payday, so I could see what was going on with the price and the market. But now I understand the shares, so you can see here, like, so if we look at my stakes here, obviously I'm getting a better share price here than I was when I staked 20 days later. So that says to me, actually, it's quite powerful to buy Hex today and stake for a longer period of time. So like I said, I'm probably going to be transferring some money over and doing a longer stake. For how long, I'm not sure. I need to really sort of sit down and evaluate how long do I personally want to have my money tied up for. Now, if Hex does rise in price and I'm gaining a lot more in Hex tokens, I'm always going to think, I wish I'd done that for a bit longer. But then you could always say, I wish I sold at the top, I wish I bought in at the bottom. There's all ifs and buts, but I have to look at how long do, in my personal circumstance, how long do I honestly want my stake last for. So this is really powerful, and I think that it can generate new wows. If you're someone who's willing to stake for a long period of time, you could become a wow within a cryptocurrency pretty easily at the moment. Obviously it's getting harder and harder each day, but I really think that this needs to be looked into. So do your own research. I feel that this is probably why people are dollar cost averaging. They're buying into the Hex transform page every day because they want the best share ratio. They're not just buying coins to hold them in their MetaMask wallet. They actually want to buy them, stake them, and then obviously gain the most amount of shares over a really long period of time. That's why we've got people doing 4.5, 5 years stakes. And if you do want to get involved in Hex, don't forget to use my referral link in the description down below, because you will get that 10%. Unless you're going to get a better offer through Uniswap, I would rather you get a better deal if that works out better for you on any given day. But don't forget that the share price is always getting more expensive, so it's always better to get involved sooner rather than later. Not financial advice. I'll see you later, guys. Bye.